let's begin. But first, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Broken Truth. The rain-streaked city lights blurred past the windshield as Julian Whitman slid behind the wheel of his sleek black car, anticipation coiling in his chest like a live wire. He left the warmth of his penthouse without a second glance, convinced the night he had planned would remain hidden forever. The soft chime of his phone buzzed incessantly, messages from Scarlet Duval waiting like whispers in the dark. Each notification made his pulse quicken, each word dripping with the thrill of secrecy. He smiled, imagining their meeting in a luxury hotel suite where no one would ever interrupt them, where no one would ever see the betrayal he had chosen. Scarlet, radiant and composed, greeted him with a mischievous glint in her eyes. Their conversation danced between professional admiration and flirtation, the line blurring until it ceased to exist entirely. Julian laughed softly at something she said, feeling the dangerous freedom of a man unbound by conscience. Texts sent to Amara went unanswered, calls ignored, a false confidence bolstering his sense of invincibility. Each moment spent with Scarlet intensified the reckless pleasure, the kind of excitement that feels like power but sows the seeds of ruin. Meanwhile, back in the Whitman mansion, Amara moved quietly through the polished halls. She adjusted a vase here, straightened a throw there, her fingers lingering on the soft fabric of the furniture as if drawing comfort from its familiarity. A faint unease tugged at the corners of her mind, but she pushed it aside, attributing it to fatigue or an overactive imagination. The house was calm, serene, filled with the gentle rhythm of her own breathing, completely unaware that betrayal was creeping closer with every mile Julian drove. Hours passed, the city sleeping under a veil of rain, and Julian finally returned home. He parked silently, confident that no one suspected a thing, that he had managed the night flawlessly. The penthouse doors opened and he stepped into the familiar warmth, unaware that Amara had already begun a plan that would shatter his world, a reckoning lying in wait that would turn his thrill into regret. The night of betrayal, so intoxicating, was only the beginning of his downfall. Years ago, Amara Whitman had first noticed Julian at a charity gala, standing confidently in a tailored suit, exuding charm that could captivate any room. She remembered how his eyes had met hers across the glittering hall, and in that moment, everything else faded. Their first conversation had been effortless, filled with laughter and shared dreams, talks of building a life together, traveling the world, and leaving a legacy that reflected their ambition and values. From that day on, a connection sparked that neither could ignore, and soon, love blossomed into a partnership rooted in admiration and mutual respect. In the early days of their relationship, Julian's career was far from the towering success it would later become. Nights were long, filled with frustration, late meetings, and the occasional rejection that weighed heavily on his spirit. Through every setback, Amara remained unwavering. She cooked meals, encouraged him during moments of doubt, and listened patiently when the pressure became unbearable. Her faith in him was unshakable, a constant anchor amidst uncertainty. Julian, for his part, admired her dedication, her intelligence, and the way she believed in him when the world seemed indifferent. Together they built a foundation of trust, patience, and hope, the kind of love that felt invincible. Their marriage had been celebrated with grandeur, but beneath the luxury and social prestige, it had always been a union of hearts committed to enduring life's trials together. They shared moments of triumph and laughter, small and significant victories that cemented their bond. Amara had always been the steady hand guiding the household, the balance to Julian's ambitious drive, and the one quietly nurturing the life they dreamed of creating. Yet as years passed, subtle cracks began to appear. Julian grew more distant, caught in the whirlwind of business and social obligations. Conversations became shorter, moments of shared intimacy less frequent, and a quiet tension began to linger in their home. Still, Amara held on to hope, convinced that love could withstand distance, and that family could overcome the silent drift. Every morning she reminded herself of the bond they had forged and the promises made in whispers long ago, believing that patience and faith could weather any storm, even when shadows began to creep into the corners of their once perfect life. Scarlet Duval was the kind of woman who commanded attention without trying. She moved through high-profile events with effortless elegance, her laughter light but calculated, her every glance sharp and deliberate. People admired her, envied her, and without realizing it, obeyed her subtle influence. When Julian first met her at an exclusive business gala, her presence was magnetic, her smile effortless, and he found himself drawn to her in a way that startled him. She complimented his achievements with precision, listened intently, and made him feel seen in ways he hadn't realized he craved. That evening, what started as polite conversation quickly became something more electric, something intoxicating. Their exchanges began innocently, emails complimenting his work, casual dinners to discuss partnerships. But each encounter blurred the line between professional and personal. Julian found excuses to see her again, each meeting masked under the guise of business. Scarlet's charm was subtle yet potent. She understood how to appeal to his ego, making him feel appreciated, desired, and understood. Every text, every laugh, every lingering touch made Julian forget the boundaries he had once respected. In the process, the lies at home became easier, each excuse a practiced performance, each delay a justification, he told himself. Meanwhile, back at the Whitman mansion, Amara noticed a shift in Julian. He was quieter at dinner, preoccupied, less engaged in their conversations. There were moments when she caught him staring at his phone, his expression flickering with something unrecognizable. Her heart sank each time she tried to confront him, but she dismissed the pangs of suspicion, blaming exhaustion, stress, or the pressures of his growing business. Yet deep inside, a whisper of doubt gnawed at her, subtle and persistent, though she refused to acknowledge it fully. Scarlet, aware of the growing distance between Julian and Amara, seized every opportunity to manipulate him further. She painted herself as the one who understood him completely, a confidant who offered escape from obligations, judgment, and the slow erosion of his personal life. She knew precisely when to encourage secrecy, when to praise his ambition, and when to plant the idea that he deserved happiness elsewhere. Julian, caught in the thrill of illicit attention and reassured by Scarlet's calculated words, drifted further from Amara. He convinced himself that nothing could go wrong, that the world of secrets and indulgence he had entered was safe. Yet with every step toward Scarlet, he inched closer to a collision with reality, a reckoning he would never see coming until it shattered everything he thought he could control. Amara Whitman began noticing small things that unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. A faint scent of unfamiliar perfume clung to Julian's coat one morning, subtle but unmistakable. His phone would vibrate in silence, notifications left unopened, calls unanswered. Emails marked read, yet never responded to. Each instance, minor on its own, began to pile into a growing sense of unease that she couldn't shake. The mansion, usually filled with warmth and routine, felt colder with Julian's absence and distracted glances, as though a shadow had settled over the home she had carefully nurtured. Friends and family, sensing the tension, began dropping hints, innocent remarks and subtle questions that carried hidden meaning. "Have you seen him much lately?" Or, "He seems different these days, doesn't he?" They watched, quietly concerned, aware of what Amara herself refused to fully acknowledge. Every word and look added fuel to the quiet fire of suspicion that simmered within her, but she struggled to reconcile it with the love and faith she had placed in Julian. Part of her wanted to dismiss the signs, to believe that their marriage, built on years of trust and sacrifice, could withstand distance and fatigue. Meanwhile, Scarlet Duval grew bolder with each passing day. She no longer whispered her victories in private, her confidence bordered on arrogance. She mocked Amara silently, knowing that Julian's attention had shifted, enjoying the thrill of her dominance in the shadows. She reveled in the knowledge that she was gradually displacing the woman who had built a life beside Julian, convinced that her elegance and manipulation gave her a permanent edge. Every encounter with Julian became more daring, every text more daring, each secret meeting carefully orchestrated to deepen the divide. As days turned into weeks, the tension in the Whitman household thickened like a storm about to break. Each small clue, unread messages, unexplained absences, a fleeting perfume, a sidelong glance, added to the invisible pressure. The walls of secrecy Scarlet had built for Julian began to strain, and the unspoken truth crept closer to exposure. Amara's intuition, quiet but persistent, hummed beneath the surface, a warning she tried to ignore, foreshadowing a reckoning that would not wait, a confrontation that would change everything she had worked to protect. Julian Whitman stepped into the grand foyer of the Whitman mansion, the soft click of his polished shoes echoing against the marble floors. The night had been everything he imagined, thrilling, indulgent, a stolen escape from the monotony he claimed to feel at home. Scarlet's laughter still rang in his ears, a reminder of the power and attention he had felt, and he carried that confidence as if it could shield him from the consequences of his choices. He thought, not for the first time, that he had mastered the art of deception. Every smile, every word, every secret movement had been calculated. Nothing could touch him tonight. Amara appeared in the living room, her posture calm, her expression serene, a faint warmth in her eyes that belied the storm she had been silently preparing. She greeted him as if it were any other morning, her voice steady, unremarkable, yet beneath the composed exterior there was steel. Julian, expecting confusion or apology, barely had time to register the casual calmness before she spoke. "Julian," she said softly, "I've filed for divorce." The words landed like a thunderclap. Julian froze, the confidence draining from his posture in an instant. He blinked, searching her face for signs of jest, of hesitation, anything that could soften the blow, but there was nothing. Shock and disbelief twisted through him, a visceral recognition that the night's thrill had blinded him completely. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat, unformed and useless against the reality of her resolve. Moments later, Nathaniel Ross, the family lawyer, arrived with the precision of someone used to delivering uncomfortable truths. He placed the thick folder on the ornate coffee table, his gaze steady, unflinching. "Julian," he said formally, "these are the terms of the divorce. Amara has made her decisions and they are final." He outlined the division of property, financial arrangements, and custody provisions with careful clarity, emphasizing that there would be no room for negotiation or leniency. Each word pressed into Julian's chest, a heavy reminder that the life he had taken for granted was slipping irretrievably from his grasp. Julian sank into the high-backed chair, the thrill of the night crashing violently into reality. Every secret rendezvous, every whispered lie, every fleeting pleasure was now meaningless, replaced by the weight of consequence. He had imagined scenarios of guilt or confrontation, but nothing had prepared him for this. Amara's calm strength, the irrevocable legal actions, and the undeniable truth that his choices had real, permanent impact. The mansion which had once symbolized success and indulgence, now felt cold, empty, and oppressive. Julian realized with dawning horror that he had not simply risked a night of indulgence. He had destroyed the very world he had built, and there was no turning back. Julian Whitman paced the marble floors of the Whitman mansion, his hands gripping the edge of the grand dining table as his mind spun in a whirlwind of disbelief. His anger bubbled up first, sharp and consuming. "How could you do this, Amara?" he demanded, his voice cracking with a mixture of frustration and shock. "After everything we built, after all these years, how could you just throw it all away?" He took a step closer as if sheer proximity could bend her to his will, but Amara remained poised, unshaken, her gaze steady and unflinching. Amara's calmness only fueled his frustration. She spoke slowly, deliberately, choosing each word to convey both certainty and finality. "Julian, this is not about anger or revenge. It's about truth, boundaries, and protecting what truly matters. I have made my decision, and it will not be changed." Her tone carried no bitterness, only an unwavering strength that cut through his pleas and accusations like a blade. She had prepared herself for this moment for weeks, every legal step and emotional shield in place, and Julian's outburst did nothing to sway her resolve. Moments later, Nathaniel Ross stepped forward, placing the divorce documents firmly on the table. He outlined the division of property, ensuring that Amara retained the majority of their shared assets, including the mansion and investments she had helped manage. He described the financial arrangements, emphasizing independence and protection for Amara moving forward. When it came to custody of their child, Theodore, Nathaniel made it clear that Julian's visitation and influence would be strictly regulated, prioritizing stability and security above all else. Each detail struck Julian with the force of inevitability. There was no room for manipulation, no loophole to exploit. Meanwhile, Scarlet Duval remained oblivious to the unfolding disaster. She texted Julian playful messages, unaware that the life she thought she was stepping into was already dissolving. Her celebrations of perceived victory were entirely premature, her confidence misplaced, and her ignorance of the consequences would soon become painfully evident. As Julian sank into the high-backed chair, the weight of reality pressed down with a suffocating force. Every choice, every betrayal, every thrill-seeking moment with Scarlet had led him here, stripped of power, influence, and control. For the first time, Julian recognized the magnitude of his mistakes, the ripple effect of deception and indulgence. Amara's composure and foresight left him exposed, alone, and vulnerable. In that moment, Julian realized that the world he had thought he ruled with charm and cunning had crumbled, and the reckoning was only just beginning. The gravity of his decisions was undeniable, and he would carry their consequences for the rest of his life. Word of Julian Whitman's indiscretion spread faster than he could have imagined. A casual mention at a high society brunch, an overheard conversation at a charity gala, and whispers from mutual acquaintances began to circulate, each retelling adding subtle embellishments that magnified the scandal. Friends he had trusted now looked at him differently, their admiration replaced with suspicion or quiet judgment. Colleagues he had once charmed with ease started keeping their distance, conversations around him tinged with uncomfortable silence. The reputation Julian had carefully cultivated over years of ambition and social maneuvering began to crack, the glossy image of power and sophistication showing its first real fractures. Scarlet Duval, who had imagined herself untouchable, felt the first tremors of consequence in her social circle. Invitations she had once taken for granted were rescinded without explanation. Subtle glances and whispers replaced the smiles she had grown accustomed to. Her confidence faltered slightly as she realized that her role in Julian's downfall was becoming public knowledge, even if the full extent of it was not yet clear. The realization that her influence and allure could not shield her forever struck a jarring chord. Meanwhile, Amara Whitman navigated the storm with quiet dignity. She moved through social events and business circles with composure, her calm poise only heightening the contrast between her strength and Julian's unraveling. She did not seek revenge through gossip or spectacle. Instead, her steadfast presence and measured responses only underscored the depth of her integrity. Every conversation, every polite smile, every nod of acknowledgement was a quiet reminder to all that she had emerged from betrayal unbroken, while Julian's world spiraled. The emotional impact on Julian escalated with each passing day. Invitations ceased, friendly greetings became strained, and his social isolation became palpable. Gossip shadowed every move, leaving him uncertain whom he could trust or rely upon. The life he had once believed secure, built on charm, wealth, and connections, was now a cage of scrutiny, judgment, and public exposure. Every whisper, every sideways glance reminded him of his mistakes, the thrill of the night with Scarlet replaced by the harsh clarity of reality. Julian was left to confront not only the collapse of his private life but also the irreversible damage to his social identity, realizing that indulgence and betrayal had consequences that extended far beyond the walls of the Whitman mansion. Julian Whitman had spent the day replaying the events in his mind, trying desperately to find a loophole, a way to reverse the tide of consequences that had begun to consume him. He stared blankly at the divorce documents scattered across the mahogany table, each page a reminder of Amara's meticulous planning, her foresight, and the unshakable strength that had always been quietly present beneath her calm exterior. He thought he understood the extent of her actions, but Nathaniel Ross, ever precise and deliberate, had one final task before the legal proceedings concluded: to deliver Amara's last message. The room fell silent as Nathaniel cleared his throat and began to read aloud. Every word carried weight, every syllable a hammer striking against Julian's illusions. "A man who betrays his vows cannot keep the life he tried to steal," he began, his voice steady. Julian's pulse quickened, his confidence faltering with each word. "All I leave belongs to our child, Theodore Whitman, and the truth is now public." The room seemed to shrink around him. The carefully crafted secrecy he had relied upon for months crumbled in an instant. Julian's eyes darted toward Scarlet Duval, who had accompanied him to the meeting under the assumption that she was part of a victorious conquest. Her face, once radiant with smug confidence, drained of color as Nathaniel continued to detail the hidden clauses Amara had included in the divorce documents. Financial assets, property rights, and custody arrangements had all been strategically designed to protect her and Theodore while exposing Julian's betrayal in the most undeniable way possible. Scarlet's realization hit her like a physical blow. The illusion of victory she had cherished so dearly evaporated before her eyes. Julian sank into the high-backed chair, his mind spinning as the weight of Amara's final words settled fully. Every thrill, every secret meeting, every stolen moment of excitement now seemed hollow, meaningless, and devastating. The shift of power was absolute. Amara, who had endured his emotional distance and betrayal for years, had orchestrated a conclusion that left him exposed, humiliated, and powerless. Nathaniel's measured reading concluded, leaving only silence. Julian's world, built on charm, wealth, and manipulation, had been overturned in a single definitive sentence. Scarlet, once confident in her place at his side, understood that she too had been deceived, a pawn in a plan far more brilliant than either of them had imagined. The audience, whether within the story or watching from afar, could feel the magnitude of the twist, the complete reversal of fortune, the elegant precision with which Amara had reclaimed her power, and the undeniable truth that Julian and Scarlet had underestimated her entirely. The stage was set for the consequences that would leave them both reeling. Julian Whitman had always believed that charm, wealth, and influence could protect him from any consequence. But the truth hit harder than he ever imagined. Within weeks of Amara's decisive legal moves, Julian found himself stripped of privileges he had taken for granted. Properties he once flaunted, investments he had managed with pride, and social connections he had cultivated over decades were now out of reach. Friends distanced themselves cautiously, wary of gossip and scandal, while colleagues once eager to collaborate began to sidestep his calls. The aura of untouchable power that Julian had relied upon evaporated, leaving him isolated and exposed. Scarlet Duval, too, could no longer hide from the repercussions. Society circles that had once welcomed her with open arms now scrutinized every move. Invitations vanished, whispered critiques followed her, and subtle, pointed judgments became unavoidable. Her reputation, built on allure and manipulation, began to crumble under the weight of public knowledge. The woman who had laughed at the idea of consequences soon realized that her confidence could not shield her from scrutiny and censure. She watched as Julian, the man she believed untouchable and devoted to her, faltered and struggled under pressure, and the illusion of their shared triumph dissolved entirely. Julian, realizing the depth of his mistakes, attempted to cling to Scarlet, to salvage something from the wreckage of his life. But the bond he had counted on was fragile, built on secrecy and deceit. With the public exposure and Amara's decisive legal maneuvering, Scarlet began to distance herself, unwilling to remain tethered to a man whose downfall threatened her own stability. Abandoned, Julian confronted the reality that his choices had left him alone, stripped of both power and companionship. Meanwhile, Theodore Whitman, young and unaware of the full drama, became the sole heir to Amara's legacy. Every safeguard she had put in place ensured that her child would be protected, loved, and raised free from the shadow of Julian's betrayals. Wealth, influence, and opportunity now flowed to Theodore under her careful guidance, leaving Julian with nothing but the echoes of his own actions. Justice, delivered with precision and without mercy, had been orchestrated entirely by Amara. Every deceit Julian had relied on, every indulgence, every betrayal, had been countered with foresight and strategy. The scales had tipped completely, leaving Julian to face the weight of consequences alone while Amara and Theodore moved forward unscathed, secure, and empowered. The reckoning was absolute, and the lesson clear. Actions born of selfishness and betrayal carry a cost that cannot be ignored or evaded. Months passed, and the Whitman mansion, once heavy with tension and deceit, found a new rhythm under Amara's careful guidance. She rebuilt her life with quiet dignity, filling her days with meaningful work, cherished routines, and the warmth of those who truly valued her. Every decision she made reinforced her strength, resilience, and unshakable commitment to her son, Theodore, whose laughter and curiosity became the heart of her world. She did not seek revenge or spectacle. Her victory lay in the stability, love, and protection she had created, proof that true power often manifests in patience, foresight, and grace. Julian wandered through the ruins of his former life, facing the consequences of his choices with bitter clarity. Wealth could not shield him, influence could not excuse him, and the thrill of illicit indulgence had evaporated, leaving only regret, isolation, and shame. Every glance from acquaintances, every whispered conversation, reminded him of the night he had squandered love for fleeting pleasure. He had learned, painfully, that charm and ambition could never replace integrity or loyalty. Scarlet, too, faded from public admiration. Invitations were rescinded, rumors followed her, and the social circles that had once embraced her warmth and cunning now distanced themselves with subtle judgment. Her confidence could not withstand the repercussions of association with Julian's downfall, and her moment of triumph became a cautionary echo of hubris. Theodore, meanwhile, grew surrounded by love, attention, and protection. Amara's careful planning ensured that he would inherit not only material security but also the strength and values of a mother who had endured betrayal with courage. The final truth of their story lingered quietly but unmistakably. Betrayal may seem private, but truth has a way of destroying the illusion of control. In the stillness of the mansion, with Theodore laughing in the sunlight and Julian's absence a permanent reminder, the lesson resonated. A life built on deception could never withstand the weight of honesty, patience, and unwavering integrity. The Whitmans had moved on, and the story closed with a reflective, yet undeniably powerful, sense of justice and closure. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Broken Truth.